I don't care who you are, 75 years worth of Batman history can be more than a little intimidating for people who are just now getting into the character's comic books. Comics are pretty difficult to get into to begin with, but it's one of my big passions in life to make sure new readers can experience this medium. Chances are there are quite a few of you out there who are yet to take the plunge, and seeing as The Dark Knight was where I first started collecting comics seriously, who knows, maybe the same trick will work on you lot. So yes folks, as one of the many gifts what culture is looking to impart this festive season, I'm Ewan, and here are 10 essential Batman stories for new readers. Number 10, The Court of Owls. The New 52 might be dead and buried, but the first story arc by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo that reintroduced old fans to The Dark Knight and made new readers just as welcome is still very much worth reading. The Court of Owls and its sequel, City of Owls, didn't bother going over the tragic childhood of Bruce Wayne that led him to adopting the cape and cowl, instead heading straight into an established crime fighter facing the toughest challenge of his career thus far. Capullo's art is certainly stylized and more than bears the echoes of Christopher Nolan's Batman films. Scott Snyder, meanwhile, focuses on Batman's reputation as the world's greatest detective, as he uncovers the decades-long conspiracy that is engaging and exciting, whilst also giving us a peek into the character's family history and building to a confrontation which reminds us that, unlike most superheroes, Bruce Wayne is only human. Number 9, Private Casebook. Paul Dini and Dustin Nguyen presided over one of the most underrated stints on Detective Comics from 2009 onwards, with Heart of Hush and Streets of Gotham having made the Hush character genuinely brilliant, but Private Casebook is possibly the most accessible story to date. For fans of Batman the Animated Series, Dini's name should be familiar. He was one of the key architects behind that series, and later took his experience from the show to comics proper, first with Mad Love, and then with intermittent stints on various Bat books in the years following. So, why Private Casebook? Well, for starters, it's reminiscent of that series and acts largely as a self-contained feature, spotlighting various Batman villains and supporting characters to great effect. It's a superb collection, and one that segues perfectly from the animated series. Number 8, FiveWay Revenge. Forget the Killing Joke and forget The Man Who Laughs. The Joker's FiveWay Revenge is the book that made the Clown Prince of Crime the legend he is today. Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams' legendary stint on Batman pretty much gave us the most iconic version of the character, his mythos, and Gotham itself, but perhaps its legacy can best be seen in the Joker himself, who became a sinister, nightmarish arch-rogue during their stint on Batman. Until the Joker's FiveWay Revenge, which released in September 1973, the Clown Prince was more a clowning prankster than a truly sinister individual. This is what makes the story so essential, and given Batruns don't get much better than O'Neil and Adams, what better place to start than with them? Number 7, Strange Apparitions. Steve Englehart is up there with the very best, with memorable stints on Captain America and Doctor Strange to his name, and Strange Apparitions sees the writer take on Batman with the addition of some memorable foes, including Hugo Strange, the Joker, and Clayface. Strange Apparitions is another comic that requires minimal knowledge of Batman to get invested in, but it also has the added bonus of being one of the genuinely great Batman stories, and one that will reward both new readers and longtime fans of the character. Strange Apparitions is also famous for including the laughing fish. It's Joker. He has a fish. He wants to sell him. What's not to love? Number 6, Tower of Babel. So, we've established most of what makes Batman great. His friends, his enemies, his city, his wonderful, wonderful toys, but for the most part, he's still been confined to his home in Gotham City. In DC Comics, there are two main depictions of Batman. There's the Batman of Gotham, who solves mysteries and fights street-level crime in the city. Then there's the superheroic Batman, who's friends with Superman, the Flash, Wonder Woman, and frequently teams up with them to fight universe-threatening menaces as a part of the Justice League, who have a headquarters on the moon. That poses two big questions, especially considering the character we've built up in the previous 4 stories. For one, where does the Dark Knight find the time to help out when he's supposed to be governing Gotham? And for another, What good is a normal bloke with a bunch of gadgets on a team of near gods? There's no good answer to the former, but the latter is explored by the JLA storyline Tower of Babel, where a villain discovers the secret files Batman has been keeping on the weaknesses of his teammates, just in case any of them turned bad. He is part of the team because he's so smart, and this brilliant Mark Waid and Howard Porter joint shows just how that intelligence is as powerful as Superman's rippling muscles. It also starkly illustrates how he thinks of his fellow heroes, and what they think of him. Number 5. The Long Halloween. The Long Halloween is a very accessible Batman story, and a fantastic one at that. The book throws in some of Batman's other villains, the Riddler and the Scarecrow, both familiar from their movie depictions, whilst also retelling the tragic story of Gotham District Attorney Harvey Dent's transformation into Two-Face. It's also just a really good classic detective story, with the organised crime in Gotham being just as fleshed out and just as much of a threat, as well as bad guy Holiday. More than that though, it gives a greater insight into both Batman and Bruce Wayne and how that dual identity works, and also provides us a little more background into the camaraderie between the Caped Crusader and Commissioner Gordon. Plus, Tim Sale's art is gorgeous, and his use of shadows makes this a non-more noir Batman tale. Those familiar with the Dark Knight movie will also be able to draw plenty of parallels between the comic and the film, with the book actually having inspired Christopher Nolan's depiction of the triumvirate of Gordon, Batman, and Harvey Dent. Number 4. Ego. Those who've been around this channel for a while now won't need reminding of my love for Darwin Cook's Batman Ego, which I consider to be one of the finest Batman stories of all time, and my personal favourite Dark Knight tale. Cook himself was a masterful creator, and Ego is right up there with his finest works. What's it about? Well, Ego is, as the name suggests, somewhat psychological. It dissects the mental anatomy of the Dark Knight and attempts to discern which mask is real, Bruce Wayne or the Bat. The answer to that question is brilliant, and one that has informed later depictions of the character. All you need to know, however, is that Ego is stunning both in the visual and narrative sense, and a brilliant introduction into some of the meatier themes surrounding the Caped Crusader. Number 3. The Dark Knight Returns. Frank Miller begins this story with Batman having long since hung up the Batman title, following the death of second Robin, Jason Todd, at the hands of the Joker. Spurned to return to his double life by the degradation of society and the sorry state of Gotham City, having survived a car crash, the elderly Bruce Wayne begins training again, although not always for the reasons you expect. As well as being a great story, The Dark Knight Returns hints that Wayne's reasons for becoming Batman weren't entirely altruistic. He reflects on the murder of his parents, but also admits to the kick he gets out of fighting bad guys. Number 2. Year 1. Not content with penning the greatest story of Batman's later years, Frank Miller teamed up with artist David Mazzucchelli to produce the greatest story ever told of Batman's early years. One of the main influences on Batman Begins, Year 1 is as much the story of Bruce Wayne's rise to the mantle of Batman as it is Jim Gordon's rise to police commissioner, and of the city's own descent into the crime-ridden hellhole that compelled these two heroes to try and save it. Year 1 is the perfect introduction to almost every one of the main facets of the Batman mythos. We get the retelling of his origin story, not just the death of his parents, but of all the training and the inspiration to dress as a bat, as well as his initial meetings with the gangs of Gotham, Jim Gordon's early experience of the corruption in the city, and early appearances by Selina Kyle and Harvey Dent, ending with a nod and wink to the Joker. Any Batman story that you've come across so far, it was all down to this story, so there's a good chance that you'll enjoy it. Also, it has the best Bat speech ever when Batman gatecrashes the mob's meeting and commences his war on crime. Perfection. Number 1. Detective Comics number 27. Where do you go after the greatest story ever told of Batman's early years? Well, you go for the earliest Batman story ever told. Created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane, The Dark Knight's first ever appearance was in the pages of Detective Comics, which would later give the burgeoning DC Comics their own name, and a surprising amount of the character's distinguishing features and elements were established which still exist 75 years on from his debut. The Bruce Wayne secret identity is not only there, but very similar to how the two are differentiated today. As Wayne, he plays the part of the billionaire playboy, oblivious to the goings-on in Gotham, whilst as Batman he is fueled by the murders of his parents to tackle down the growing organised crime in the city. There's Commissioner Gordon, the Batcave, the costume, and utility belt. The case of the Chemical Syndicate also establishes Batman first and foremost as a detective, as he is called in to solve a crime that has the city's police force completely puzzled. There are some notable differences from his later characterization, however, especially when he lets the villain of the piece die, in line with the pulp heroes that inspired his creation. Still, Detective Comics number 27 does such a good job of introducing the character of Batman that it should be every Bat fan's first port of call.